What's up, guys? This is Dr. Zach Geiser, and I am really excited because today is the very first episode of our podcast. And I've really been wanting to do this for a long time. I am a podcast connoisseur. I am constantly consuming a large amount of podcasts, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to get on the other end of this thing and share some information with you all. And so we're going to get into all of our speed training, our rehab stuff, all of our training stuff today. But the first thing that I want to talk about is the power of imperfect action. So the reason I want to talk about that is because this podcast right here is the epitome of imperfect action. So I have a lot of friends who have talked about, hey, I want to start my own, whether they're a physical therapist or strength coach, hey, I want to start my own business. I want to start my own gym. I want to start my own online training business. I want to start my own physical therapy clinic. Or we have a lot of athletes that I've talked to who have said, hey, I want to start training with you at this point in time. I want to start doing, I want to get our diet locked in at this point in time. And they're always waiting for the stars to align. So they wait for everything to be perfect. They're like, man, I want to wait for the new year, or I want to wait till I have X amount of dollars in my bank account to start up my own business, or whatever the case may be. They're looking for everything to be a little bit better, at least, than it is right now. I'm here to let you know that doesn't happen. That time doesn't come. The stars never completely align for you to do something. So right now, we don't have a name for this podcast. I am sitting here in our treatment room with a tripod set up. My iPhone's my camera right now. I've got no microphone. Again, we've got no name for the podcast. But we're letting it rip. We're letting it ride. We're doing it. And so what people don't do is what people don't do is take the opportunity that they have right in front of them and just go for it. So the founder of LinkedIn, his name's Reid Hoffman. He has this saying that he talks about when he talks about entrepreneurship. He talks about entrepreneurship is like jumping off a cliff and building the plane on the way down. And that's what a lot of things in life are really like. You have to go for it. You have to decide what you want in life, what you want to do, what your next step is, and then find a way to get it done. Don't sit there and contemplate it over and over and over again. Now, I'm not saying being reckless and don't have any plan whatsoever, but people who achieve greatness, they don't ever, start with an outline of this is what day one's going to look like, this is what the end day is going to look like, and they have every step mapped out in between. You figure it out as you go. So you have to have a general outline, a general idea of what you want this to look like. And then you go for it. You just have to shoot or shoot, man. That's a saying for a reason. I love that saying, shoot or shoot. You got to go for it. Once you get that thing started too, the other fault that I see a lot of the time is people don't follow up. People give up way too easily when things get tough. And so if they're looking to start a business, whatever, or looking to start their online growth, then they put out a couple posts. People don't start paying them a whole bunch of money right away. They get all discouraged and then they just stop. But breakthroughs happen whenever you're consistent, whenever you keep chopping wood there. And so this is a very perfect example of imperfect action where we don't have everything put together. But what we do have for you all is a lot of information, and that's what I'm really excited to share with you. Our technological stuff is going to get a lot better as we go. But we've got some great information for you guys right out the gate. So let's get started with that. So our first question, we've got our questions listed up on the whiteboard over here. Our first question is an example of what you guys like to talk about all the time. You guys often send in questions that are, what is the single best thing? And so I will say that is not how the world works. That's not how training works. That's not how rehab works. There isn't one best way to get things done. There are wrong ways to do things, but there's not one best thing for anything. There's a lot of context that's always involved. There's a lot of a variety of factors that you have to account for, which is why we do such in-depth evaluations when we start, which is why we're constantly changing our plans whenever new information comes in. But I'm going to feed that flame a little bit for you guys. You guys want to know, so I'll give you a straight answer for it. But the question is, if I had to choose one drill to get faster, what would I choose? And the answer is sled sprints. So I have to go with sled sprints, or at least I'll say the pairing of sled sprints with unresisted sprints. So sprinting in itself is the best way to get better at sprinting. The best way to get better at something most of the time is to do that thing. And so some very intentional sprinting, and specifically sled sprinting with unresisted sprinting, has so many unbelievable benefits that it is the most common best drill for people to get faster. Again, there's a lot of caveats that go along with it. And the reason I say sled sprints though is because not only does it train the physical side of things, it also trains the technical side of things. I'm going to get into the technical side of things in a little bit. But speed in and of itself is a force dependent quality, meaning it breaks down to, at the most basic level, how much force can you put into the ground and how quickly can you put that force into the ground. So Newton's third law tells us that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So what that means is if I'm sprinting and I want to go out that way, I need to put force down and back into the ground that way. When you sprint, you don't want to go straight up and straight down. You want to be able to go out because you're trying to travel that way. So all your force, or at least a majority of your force, or a good amount of your force, I'll say, should be going back and down into the ground to project you out that way. If you're only, and so there's the equal and opposite side of this. So the equal portion of it refers to the magnitude of force. And so if you're putting a small amount of force, meaning you have not a very powerful step, you're not really putting a lot of force into the ground, then you're only going to get a small reaction force out of the ground, and you're not going to have a lot of pop with each step. You're not going to travel a far different distance. You're not going to have a good enough hang time. You're not going to have the power you need to have good acceleration. So the opposite, the equal and opposite portion refers to the direction of the force. And so if you have a very vertical shin angle and your force is going straight down into the ground like this, all your force that you're getting back out of the ground is going to go straight up and straight down. So not only does that force need to be large in magnitude, it also matters what direction it's going. So that's why a vertical jump is it can be different than an acceleration. So while there's a lot of translation between the two qualities there, the two tests there, the vertical shin angles that you need in a vertical jump are very different than the horizontal shin angles that you need to have in an acceleration. So the sled sprints is almost like resistance training. It's almost like weight training that's super, super, super specific to speed. So it develops the physical qualities that we're looking to develop with speed, but then it also teaches you how to get into those shin angles. And so the sled sprints are a very good technical drill, in addition to being a very good physical drill. So whenever you have that weight that's pulling you back, you're able to access those shin angles much more efficiently than you'd be able to without that sled pulling you back. And so the sled sprints are phenomenal. They're my go-to whenever we need to get people fast very quickly. That's worked in both anecdotal experience for myself as an athlete, anecdotal experience with working with athletes, a large amount of athletes as a coach, and then it bears out in the research and the actual scientific literature as well. So if I had to choose one thing, I'm going to do sled sprints and pair them with some regular sprints. All right, so our next question is a really good one. It's one that we're going to go really, really deep into. We'll take a deep dive into in a future podcast episode. It's going to have its own episode devoted entirely to this one subject matter because it's that important and there's that much information to go over. And the question is, what do I need to know before ACL rehab? I love this question, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about it. So I'll break my answer down into two parts here. The first part would be to choose your providers wisely, I should say. And the second part is to do it right the first time around. Now I'm going to go a lot deeper into all those and actually give you some actual information here, but those are the two general categories. So make sure you choose your providers wisely. And so when you're choosing a surgeon, make sure you go to somebody who does a ton of ACL surgeries each year. You don't want to go to somebody who does a handful here, a handful there, a couple times a year. They do a couple ACL surgeries. You want to go to a surgeon who specializes in this, who is world-class at doing ACL surgery. You want to make sure you're going to somebody who does these on a super regular basis, not somebody who does them just here and there. Make sure you go to a specialist when it comes to this. And I don't think this really happens anymore. I haven't seen it recently, but I know I saw it in the past. If anybody ever tells you they're using a cadaver graft, run. Don't. You're an athlete. Just run out of there. Don't let them cut you open. The second aspect of that when it comes to choosing your provider wisely is just as important, if not more important, is to choose your physical therapist very wisely. Now I'm speaking as a physical therapist here. When I say that PT school does not prepare us to deal with athletes who are high achieving or who have high achieving goals, or athletes in general, I'll say it. Physical therapy school is good for developing general therapists who can deal with some immediate post-surgical stuff. So for your first 4 to 6 months or so, depending on your timeline and your trajectory there, you'll be okay with just about any physical therapist. I'd say probably 75% of physical therapists are going to do just a fine job with you in those first 4 to 6 months post-surgically. But after that, you want to make sure you go to somebody who's really a specialist in sports. Make sure you go to somebody who has extra training outside of just physical therapy school, who really has devoted a lot of time and energy to understanding what high performance actually looks like, because we don't get that in PT school. You want to make sure you go to somebody who understands how to train an athlete, a healthy athlete, to reach high performance, because that's what you really become after that time period. You need to achieve a level of performance probably that you've never been at before in order to make sure this stuff doesn't happen again. The reason why that's so important brings us into to bullet point number 2, that you want to make sure you do this right the first time around. The reason I say that and the reason I point that out is because re-tear rates are way too high. Re-tear rates, the numbers will change depending on the study, but somewhere between around like 12% to 31% of people who have ACL reconstruction will have a re-tear or a contralateral tear, meaning tearing the other leg, within a 2-year window after surgery. So those numbers are high. Like, that's not a small amount of people. That's a large amount of people are re-tearing. And that's in large part because we're not controlling all the variables that we could possibly control. We don't have a super long list of things we know that are correlated to re-tearing your ACL. It's not a super long list of items that we know if we check all of these off, that's going to reduce your likelihood. But there's a list, and we want to make sure that we check off the things that we do know. One of those things is isolated quad strength. And so making sure that your physical therapist is both testing and addressing isolated quad strength. And that means your only test can't be like a single leg press that's a compound movement, or a goblet squat, or a single leg squat test, or things like that. Now, I think those are important and you want to do those. We do those. I think they're astronomically important, but they cannot replace isolated quad testing. So whether that's with a dynamometer, a crane scale, whatever machine that they have available to get isolated quad strength numbers is super important, because that's what we know is correlated to re-tears. If you don't have isolated quad strength, meaning that quad in and of itself is about as strong as the opposite leg, then you're going to run into some issues and you're more likely to re-tear. If you're just testing the single leg press or the compound movements like that, then you're able to compensate and you're able to use movement patterns or muscles that aren't the quad in order to get it up. So a lot of people I've seen in the past, they'll pass their single leg press test, and then you actually test the quad, and there's a huge deficit. They're really weak in that quad. So you need to make sure that you're actually testing and addressing isolated quad strength. The second thing is probably the most important one, if I had to choose one, like you guys like me to do. And I'm going to shoot straight with you guys on this one. Most people beat around the bush, but just plain and simple, don't come back before 9 months. And I'm going to say that again, don't come back before 9 months. There are special exceptions to this. And so if you have some professional money on the line, you have to be back in time. Or if you have, say you have this, it's a championship game, it's your senior year, or you have this one window of time where if you don't perform in this window, then you're not going to get a scholarship. Those instances are few and far between. You're more than likely not in that situation. So don't come back before 9 months. And the reason I'm so emphatic about that is because the literature is very clear. For every month that you return before the 9-month mark, you are 51% more likely to re-tear your ACL. So that means if you come back at 6 months versus coming back at 9 months, you are 153% more likely to re-tear. So make sure you're meeting that 9-month marker. The last ACL tidbit that we're talking about today is a new and upcoming one, but one that I think has a lot of potential and is really going to bear fruit in the research here over these next few years, is rate of force development. And so that's basically saying how much force can you produce in a small amount of time. And so there's some promising literature that suggests that, hey, being strong, important, super important. But you also have to be strong in a short window of time because ACLs don't tear slowly. They typically happen in about 0.2 of a second or less. And so you need to make sure that whenever you get into those wonky positions, you get into those weird positions that you're more likely to have an injury in, you need to be able to provide some strength, provide some stability, and get out of those positions very quickly. So doing things like a 4-jump test, or if you have access to a force plate, doing some rate of force development testing, can be very, very important as well. So make sure you're choosing the right providers, and make sure you do everything in your power to do this once. Don't do it a second time around. Our last question of the day revolves around recovery, and it's another one of those, what's the best? What's the one answer questions? So you guys wanted to know, what's the best way to recover between training sessions? And so while there may not be one simple best answer, because we always operate in the gray, we always operate in nuance, context always matters, there are 3 big pillars that you need to make sure you take care of first, and those are pretty clear cut. The 3 big pillars you need to make sure you take care of are making sure you're sleeping a ton, making sure you're getting enough sleep. If you're an adolescent athlete, so if you're a teenage athlete, you need to be sleeping an absurd amount. So a ton of sleep, followed by making sure that you have a ton of high quality food in you. Most of you are probably under eating a little bit. That's not always the case, but as a general trend, make sure you eat enough high quality food to refuel yourself as a competitive athlete. And then the third thing that you need to make sure you take care of is make sure you monitor your loads, making sure that your workloads are not too high, that you're beating yourself to death, or that you're not under training. So we have sleep, nutrition, and workload. Those are our 3 big pillars. If you're not taking care of those, anything else is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. It's not going to do the trick. It's not going to cover up the bigger systemic issues that we have to take care of. If you are taking care of those things, there are some adjunctive techniques that we can apply. And we're going to start big picture to kind of go with the why, and then we're going to go specifically into the what after that. So our why is to jumpstart our parasympathetic nervous system. That's what we're looking to accomplish with our recovery techniques. And so when you have your autonomic nervous system has 2 subdivisions to it. It has your sympathetic nervous system and it has your parasympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is your fight and flight system. So that's whenever you get all juiced up pre-game, you get nervous before a test, you get those butterflies in your stomach, your heart rate goes up a little bit, you get a little bit sweaty. That's your sympathetic nervous system. It's really good for performance. It's really good for those transient moments of competition where you need to be more alert. You need to be ready to react to a variety of stimuli. It's really good for that time period, but it's really bad for long-term recovery. In order to recover, we need to jumpstart our parasympathetic nervous system. Our parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest system. So that's whenever we have increased blood flow to the gut, we are able to get the nutrients that we're actually eating into our bloodstream a little bit more efficiently. We're able to send those nutrients out to areas that we need to heal. That's why you hear so much about people who have chronic stress levels. They actually have physical detriments to them, because if you're always anxious, you're always nervous, you're always stressed out, your body doesn't get into that parasympathetic nervous system a lot, and you're not able to recover. That's when we run into those long-term stress issues. So you want to do things that jumpstart your parasympathetic nervous system. And to break it down simply, things that jumpstart your parasympathetic nervous system are things that you're going to enjoy, things that are relaxing to you, things that you find to be relaxing, enjoyable, stress-free, and so that could be meditation. We have Normatec boots in here, or it could be getting on our lounge chair and closing your eyes and feeling the boots compress you because they feel pretty good. It could be foam rolling. For me, foam rolling is actually stress-inducing for a decent amount of my body parts because I find it cumbersome and challenging to get in some positions sometimes, and so it stresses me out a little bit. So it doesn't really help me recover that well. Could be massage techniques. It could be some different e-stim. There are a variety of different ways. And so ice baths may help. They may not help. They may hinder the response a little bit. But big picture, do things that you enjoy. Read a good book. Close your eyes. Take some downtime. And if you do that in addition to your 3 big pillars, then your recovery is going to be where it needs to be at. So that's all we've got for today's podcast. Like I said, I'm excited for this to continue to get better and better. I want to answer as many of your questions as we can, so please send those in. DM us on Instagram at GTperformance_, or shoot me an email at zach@gtperformancecenter.com. Whatever means necessary. Send us some questions. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we'll be back next week. All right, guys, be greater than. I'll see you.